So in this lecture, we will look at the topic called contract costing. So I'll first spend some time to give you an overview about contract costing from an examination standpoint, and I'll tell you how you will have to, and I would suggest how you can allocate your time for contract costing preparation and contract costing revision as far as the entire subject of cost and management accounting is concerned. So we will have a general discussion first about how this topic fits into the entire syllabus. After that, we can have an introduction to the topic as such. We will understand what this topic is all about and what is the role that it plays in the entire subject, and why do we need to have a separate chapter called as contract costing. So all that we will discuss. And once we have a once we have a broad overview of the topic by way of having an introduction, then we will start doing several questions, and through those questions we will understand uh, the concepts in this topic area. So so I can probably break this entire lecture into three parts. One will be discussion about syllabus discussion, I would say, from exam standpoint. So that is the first thing. Then we will have intro to the topic, intro to the topic, where we will understand what is this topic and how it relates to the goal of a costing system, and what is that we will be looking at a high level. So all of that we will learn, we will understand in the second part. Then we look at conceptual discussions through problem solving. So we will take several problems and then we will look at using those problems, we will understand the concepts in this topic. So this is how I want to split this lecture. Okay, three parts. So let's first focus on the first part. We will have a discussion about this from the exam standpoint. So first of all, when you look at it from an exam standpoint, as far as I have observed the past exam question papers, and I'm now here talking about I'm specifically talking about the new syllabus. As far as I have observed the past exam question papers, I can't really say that in every exam you are likely to get a question on contract costing, because what I have seen is not in all exams you get a question in contract costing. Probably in every two or three exams, definitely you get a question, right? So my observation, I can say, definitely one question in two or three exams, right? If you take 2-3 attempts and you observe the question paper, you can definitely, I mean, I have seen one question come from contract costing. Sometimes you might also get a question in contract costing in 2 consecutive exams or in 3 consecutive exams. And then you might have a break for next several exams, and then you might again get back contract costing. So the past trend is only indicative. You cannot completely rely on that. So it will not be a great idea to look into the past 2 exam question papers and then speculate whether you're likely to get contract costing in your exam or not. So that's not the, in fact, that's not the idea why I'm telling you this. But I just want to emphasize on the relative importance of this topic area compared to the other topics. So that's what we, be it costing or be it FM or be it any topic area, when we say that a certain topic is not or was not tested regularly in the exam. When I say that a certain topic did not get tested in every exam in the past, so that does not definitely mean that in the future also it's going to be like that. But the only thing is, compared to some other topic which got tested regularly, we can probably make a logical inference that probably this topic was not as important as the other topic which got regularly tested, right? So that's what I want to kind of send across as a message when I say that, it doesn't come. I mean, I've not seen it in all of the past exam question papers as far as the new syllabus question papers are concerned. So in fact, it's very difficult when you have to come out with an accurate, when you analysis of past papers is easy, but if you want to kind of predict what is likely to appear in the exam, that's going to be a very difficult task, right? So that's why so much of disclaimers and all that stuff. So anyway, so summarizing this, what I've said about exam is that once in 2 or 3 exams, definitely you can expect one question in contract costing. And if at all a question comes, now you can definitely get questions for 10 marks. So you can expect questions for 10 marks definitely. So because you have material in your 10 marks question, I'll say 10 mark question possible. Okay, you definitely have material in this chapter, content in this chapter, which will lend itself for a 10 marks question. So if at all this comes in the exam, you can definitely expect a 10 mark question. And sometimes you can also have a 5 mark question. There are some you will see that there are some questions which are very small. So if those type of questions appear in the exam, then they could probably occupy 5 marks in your 100 marks costing exam. So 5 marks or 10 marks, all of these things are possible. 10 marks being the maximum number of I mean being the I would say the upper limit. I can probably say 10 mark questions definitely possible. Now, another thing I want to talk about as far as the exam is concerned is the syllabus has greatly reduced. This is the next thing. So if you look at the ICAI study material, and if you look at what is the content that's there in contract costing, what is that they plan to test you on, if at all they decide to test you on contract costing. If you look at the ICAI study material, you understand that the syllabus has greatly reduced. When I say greatly reduced, what I mean is when ICAI transitioned from the old syllabus to the new syllabus. In the old syllabus, contract costing had a lot more content, and if a question in contract costing appears in the exam, it had a lot more to test you on. But in the new syllabus, it's not like that, right? The content in contract costing has greatly reduced, so there are only a few things that are there and that you'll have to study. So a syllabus has been greatly reduced, and to that extent I would say the chapter has become easier. I'll say the chapter has become easier because only so many things are there for you to understand, unlike what it was earlier. Even earlier, it was not a very difficult chapter at all, but that's why I've relatively said that the chapter has become easier as far as the new syllabus is concerned. So what this means is, do not, I would say, do not look at old syllabus questions. This is at least my suggestion. Do not look at old syllabus questions. When I say old syllabus questions, be it old syllabus ICAI study material question, or old syllabus practice manual question, or old syllabus RTP or exam question itself, please do not look into this, at least as far as your exam preparation is concerned. Mainly because if you see an old syllabus exam question, you will definitely find that question testing you a lot more than what we cover in our lecture here. So that's mainly because we are not covering what is not there as a part of our syllabus. So please do not look at your old syllabus questions, at least as far as the exam preparation is concerned. This is my suggestion, right? This is definitely my suggestion. Or if you see that I'll look at the old syllabus question paper and then I'll kind of remove whatever is not there in the syllabus and then use the balance part. Now I would say that's not a very efficient use of your time. Because rather than wasting time like that, again my suggestion would be just use whatever questions are there available for new syllabus, just practice those should be more than sufficient. At the end of the day, when I say my observation, definitely one question or 2 or 3 exams, let me contrast this with marginal costing or standard costing or chapter like overheads, where in which you can definitely expect a very regular testing, right? You can definitely expect one question at least in the exam from overheads, marginal costing, standard costing. So this topic is not like that. So when that is the case, when you're preparing from an exam standpoint, why would you want to spend too much of time? So my suggestion, do not look at the old syllabus questions and then don't get carried away if they have a lot more content than what the new syllabus questions would have. This is one. So as far as the exam is concerned, I think this is all I would like to tell you, right? Once in 2-3 exams, then you can even get questions for 10 marks. Syllabus is greatly reduced. Do not look at the old syllabus questions. And another thing related to exam, from your preparation perspective and also from our coverage perspective, I'm going to focus mainly on ICAI study material problems. This is going to be our focus here. ICAI study material problems. Now, I would suggest you also restrict your practice to ICAI ICAA problems, or I would say official ICAA questions. You also restrict your practice to that. This is again my suggestion, because you have limited time, and in my view, best source for preparation is your ICAA materials. So we are going to focus only on ICAA study material problems. And one thing what I've observed in ICAA study material problems is this has about 7 or 8 questions in your ICAA study material. You have 7 or 8 questions. If you go from contract costing, if you go through all of those questions, then even even if you look at the new syllabus RTPs, 1 or 2 RTPs, you have a question in contract costing. That question easily you will be able to solve if you just solve the study material problems. Exam question also, 1 or 2 exams in the past, in the new, as from the time the new syllabus is operational, you can see a question in contract costing. So all of those questions you will definitely be able to answer if you understand the ICAA material problems conceptually, right? Now, one thing is very important: you should understand these problems conceptually. It's not just enough if you, if you know how to solve the problem. If you mechanically know even if you mechanically know the steps to solve a problem, that's not sufficient. But you should know the concept. You should understand why a certain thing is happening the way it is happening. If you understand that about the ICAA study material problems, if you conceptually get all of that in place, then your RTP problem or an exam problem is definitely something that you will be able to manage. In fact, you will see that after watching this lecture, if you take an RTP question to practice, or you take an ICAA exam question to practice, you will see how easy it will be for you if you have understood the study material problem thoroughly, right? So that's something that I'm going to say. I'm going to restrict only to ICAA study material problems. That is more than sufficient as far as getting a good grip in this topic is concerned. But again, let me emphasize on this. Let me put it here. Conceptual understanding is important. Okay. So even if you do 3 or 4 problems only, if you practice 3 or 4 problems only, but all the 3 or 4 problems that you practice, you thoroughly know what you're doing, why you're doing, then any other problem, it will automatically become very easy for you. So that's something that I would like to say. So this is what I'm going to, let me restrict my discussion about exam and your preparation and how on your focus, all of that stuff. Let me restrict my points to this. Now, with all this, let's go to the second part, which is intro to the topic. Now, the reason why I was spending some time on this, and I was also focusing on do not look at the old syllabus questions and then ICAA study material problem focuses. The reason is, I mean, I don't want anyone of you to think that we have not practiced problems from other sources. See, the important reason is you do not have many problems. After the syllabus is reduced, you can't look at the old syllabus questions. Then whatever is available in the new syllabus, only those are the questions that you can see. So since the syllabus is reduced and we should operate in this arena only, our hands are also tied. So, and that too, from my experience, as far as the exam is concerned, there's no better source than ICAA material. If someone is thorough with the ICAA study material problems and also and consequently the RTP questions that someone has gone through, then I don't think it's going to be a great deal to keep practicing problems from other sources as far as your exam is concerned. Okay, so I want to make that point very clear so that you don't have to think that we are doing only limited number of problems. Even the problems that we are doing, we will focus on completely understanding those problems. Okay, I want to make that very clear. That's why. Now come to the second part, which is the intro to the topic. See, let's first discuss about, in this section, let's discuss about how this topic contract costing is going to fit into the big picture, right? So when I say big picture, what do I mean? Let's take the entire subject of cost and management accounting, and let's then try to fit this topic into that big picture. See, this is similar to how I always kind of link any topic in FM to the big picture. So whenever I introduce a topic, you would have seen me tell that FM is made up of 3 types of decisions: investing decisions, financing decision, dividend decision. And what are each of these? I'll recap, and then I'll tell you that this topic is going to be classified as a part of this decision, and I'll tell you what is that this topic mainly tries to address, how is it related to the scope of the FM function itself, and then we'll start our conceptual discussion, right? So that's what I mean when I say fitting a certain topic into the big scheme of things, or the larger scheme of things, or the big picture. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. In the big picture of costing, how is this contract costing topic going to fit inside? See, I'm going to say that cost accounting as such has an objective, and that objective is tracing cost to a cost object. This is the goal of cost accounting, right? Tracing cost to a cost object. Now, this is how I also began lecturing on employee labor costing, right? Employee cost or labor costing. This is what I told you. What is the objective of the costing system? To trace cost to a cost object. So in that lecture, we also understood what we mean by cost object. So anything for which you want to collect cost is called as a cost object. It could be a product, it could be a service activity, it could be a certain division in your company, it could be a certain department, or it could be a branch of a company, or it could be one factory, it could be virtually anything, right? So anything for which you want to collect cost, that is what is called as the cost object. But based on the cost object, the nature of cost could vary. Something which was an indirect cost when you're looking at one product as a cost object might become a direct cost if you're looking at one factory as the cost object, right? Something that was an indirect cost if you're looking at one factory as the cost object could become a direct cost when you look at the entire company as a cost object. So that is something. So if you keep changing the cost object, the classification of cost as direct or indirect, that could change. But a cost object is anything for which you collect cost. And tracing cost to cost object is the general objective, I would say, or the high level objective of costing. Now, why is this done? Why does costing want to trace the cost to a cost object? Or in other words, why do we want to find out the cost of a product? Or why do we want to find out the cost of a service? Or why do we want to find out the cost of running a factory? Why do we want to do that? I'll tell you mainly for two reasons. One is fixing a price. Okay, one is fixing a price. Let me call this pricing. Okay, let me call this pricing. Pricing could be one. Or if price is already fixed in the beginning, you want to know, or profit determination. Okay. Two of these things, if you want any one of the two things, if you want to do, you need to have details about the cost. I know I calculate the cost of a product, then I may want to add a markup and I want to fix the selling price. That's what we call as pricing. Or for a certain product, this is the selling price that is fixed. I want to calculate what is the cost of manufacturing that product so that I know what is the profit I'm making out of every product that I manufacture and sell. So either for pricing, when pricing is what you are planning, is what you want to do, or if price is already fixed, you want to understand the profit out of every item, then for that also you definitely need to find out the cost associated with one unit of the cost object. So either for pricing or for profit determination. This is why tracing of cost is very important. Now, if you look at all the chapters that you have seen in costing, the cost object kept changing. For example, there were chapters where you had to find out the cost of a product. For example, materials cost will be given, labor cost will be given, overheads will be given. Overheads, some method of apportionment will be there. Then put all of those things together and then you say this is the cost of manufacturing one unit of that product. There you would have learned the distinction between product cost, period cost, all of that. So putting all those concepts into together, what is that you would have done? You would have found out the cost of a product. So finding out the cost of a product where one product is the cost object, some chapters focused on that. Some other chapters focus, for example, let me call this as product costing. Okay, product costing. You had a lot of chapters on pricing, which is basically product costing. Now, there was another chapter called as service costing, or it's also called as operating costing, where the cost object was not a product; it was probably a service, right? For let's take a transportation company. A bus wants to charge a certain fare, okay, for every trip it is going to offer. So for every trip, what is the cost associated? What is the cost of running the bus for one trip? And then what is the price that what is the price it will have to keep for the ticket, right? For example, a transportation company or a hospital, right? So if you look at all of these things, there the cost object was not a product, it was a service. Transportation as a service, or healthcare as a service, or I would say if you look at hotels, entertainment as a service. So all of these things were all service activities for which you wanted to find out the cost. That's what you learned in service costing. Now, Another cost object for which you wanted to trace the cost was a process for which you had a chapter called as process costing. So for this process that I am doing in my factory, what is the cost associated? All of these things. What is the closing stock? All of that stuff. Process costing, recollect all that you have learned about equivalent units, and then what is the normal loss, abnormal loss, all of that stuff, right? So for one process, you want to trace the cost associated. So that is something that you did in process costing. And you also learn something called as job costing, right? A customer comes and gives a job, right? Please do this, right? The job could be also a service activity, or a job could be using certain products and then doing some service on that, like works contract. So for every single job, what is the cost of doing that job? So job was the cost object. That's what you learned in job costing. So if you look at all these chapters, all of this are chapters in the syllabus, right? In your cost and management accounting chapter, all of these are in your cost and management accounting syllabus, all of these are individual chapters. If you look at all these chapters, each chapter focused on cost calculation and associated concepts with respect to one single type of cost object. Here it was product, here it was service activity, here it was a process, here it is job. Now, exactly on similar lines, the topic that we are going to see right now, called as contract costing, this is what we will be focusing on right now in this lecture. Here, this topic, if you see, contract costing, if you see, we are going to look at a cost object which is called a contract. A contract is going to be a cost object and for one cost object, or for one unit of a cost object called a contract, we are going to see what will be the cost associated, and in the process we will be looking at several concepts. We said that one of the objectives of tracing cost was to find out profit. So here, for one contract, what is the cost associated and what will be the profit associated? So all that is what we are going to see, and that is going to be the scope of our study when we look at contract costing. So what is the cost object here? Contract, one contract is a cost object. Now, you would have learned in your contract act that basically a contract is an agreement which has some legal enforceability. An agreement enforceable by law is what we call as a contract. You have a definition in contract act. So what is the meaning when I say a contract is a cost object? No, you should understand that when I say a contract is cost object, what that contract is all about, that is very important, right? You could have a contract to render, let's say, auditing service, right? If you're an auditor, you could have a contract with your client, and through that contract, you seek an auditing assignment, right? So there's a contract of service. An employee who works with a company has an employment contract. So basically, if you look at contract, here we are going to say that a contract is going to represent a certain work that is to be done. So for that work may be in the nature of a job or maybe in the nature of a service. So for doing that one job or for doing that one service, which is represented through a contract, we want to find out the cost. So we are saying the one contract talks about doing one particular service or job for a particular customer. For that, what is the cost associated? We want to find out. So we are saying that we want to find out the cost associated with one contract. So here, when we say contract, we should dig deeper and say that here contract is contract for doing some activity. Could be a service or could be the nature of a job. Now, a very important question that we'll have to first answer before we proceed any further is, if that is the case, why should we have a separate chapter? Because we already have something called a service costing. And for most service activities, you will definitely have a contract of service, right? For example, if you go to a hotel, right, you want to check in for 2 days. The hotel is definitely going to offer you some, it's going to offer you a place to stay, and it will give you some services, right? If you're a customer of the hotel, you're staying there, probably the breakfast is complimentary. You can use the gym, and you can use other facilities and amenities in the hotel. So now, is that going to just happen with oral agreement between you and the guy in the reception? Definitely not, right? You're signing something and you are paying him money. For that, he is giving you a bill. All of these things are there. So what does this mean? Suppose you pay him money and then later he says in 1 or 2 days he'll kick you out, get out. That's what he says. Now, would you get out? You'll definitely go and file a case, right? You will say that I paid money for this and I have this bill which is like a contract, right? Through this contract, I've given you money and you have offered me the right to stay in this hotel for 2 days or 3 days. So even in that service activity, you had a contract. An auditing happens, you had a contract for that. A transportation happens, so you have a contract with the transportation company, right? You have a contract for almost all service activities that you do, be it a very small service like a 15 minutes bus ride also. If you go inside, buy the ticket from the conductor and you travel in the bus, that's an implicit contract that you're entering into with the transportation provider. So if you look at contract as such, we have seen job contracts, we have seen service contracts already, and we have seen separate chapters dedicated to jobs and services. Why should we have a separate topic called contract costing? What is that we are going to learn in this chapter that you didn't learn in service costing or in job costing? What is so special or specific about contract costing? See, we are at a high level, we are not going to learn something that's completely different, completely new to you, or something that you have never even thought about. If you look at service costing or job costing, we are going to still talk about jobs which are in the nature of service only. But the only thing is, we are going to talk about such jobs here that take a very long time for completion. So jobs taking a very long time for completion. This is what we are going to speak about when we talk about contract costing. Jobs take, so here we are talking about contracts for jobs taking a very long time for completion. So here the phrase long time is not defined, right? But what we mean is, generally when you say long time, it cuts across one period, one accounting period. So a service started today probably does not get over in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or 5 months. It takes probably, let's say, 1.5 years, or it takes 2.5 years, or it takes 2 years, 3 years. So it takes a time as long as that for that to get over. So such jobs, we want to find out the cost associated. That is only what we are going to learn here. Very good example that I can give you, best example is construction contracts. So construction contracts which are taken by construction companies, they will adopt definitely a contract costing system, because most of the contracts that they take for doing some services, most of the jobs that they undertake to the contracts are all not going to get over in 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days, or 1 week, 2 weeks, or 1 month, or 2 months also. They're all going to take a lot of time, and in most cases, that activity that they have undertaken might cut across one accounting period and might even go to the other accounting period. Right? In most cases, it would. Imagine a construction company taking up the project of metro is a good example, right? L&T took up the metro project. So obviously there would have been a contract of service between the government and L&T. Obviously we understand that this L&T work was happening, this metro work was happening for so many years. It didn't happen, the metro lines didn't come overnight. So these contracts take a lot of time for completion. So for those contracts, what is the costing that we are going to see? That's what makes contract costing peculiar from other types of things that we have seen. So we can say that a contract costing is essentially job costing, where the job is a peculiar type of job which takes a very long time for completion, not a job that gets done in few days, or in a few weeks, or in a few months time. So that's what is very, very important. So the time for completion, that's what makes the entire topic, a separate or a special one for our consideration. Now, next question is, now we understand what contract costing is going to talk about. Mainly we are going to be talking about construction contracts taking a lot of time. So we understand the difference between a traditional job costing system or a service costing system and then a contract costing system. We are good. But the next question is, if a certain job takes a long time for completion, why should you have a separate system for costing, right? Why can't you have it as a part of your job costing itself or service costing? Why should you have contract costing, right? Let's say there are 5 jobs. Job 1 to 4 take 4 months each. Job 5 alone takes 2 years. Oh, why can't you say, I have 5 jobs, I will use job costing system. 5th job alone takes 2 years. So it's slightly different from other jobs. Why should you have a separate system for costing? Why is that this long time is very important for our consideration here? The idea is, when your activity splits and splits across different accounting periods, then there are a lot of things which will definitely draw your attention, which you don't need to worry about when you don't take so much of time to complete. I started this year, I started in the second month this year, and I completed my job in the fourth month this year. I took 2 months' time. Now, when did I start work? This year. When did I complete work? This year. When did I sell my work to the customer? This year. When did I collect sales? This year. When did I incur cost? This year. Everything happens this year. So there are not many things that we'll have to worry about. But I started construction this year. I incurred so much of cost for the first year. End of first year, the job is still work in progress. It is still going on. I have not sold it to my customer. He has probably given me only a little bit of money. He has not given me full money because I have not completed my job. The second year, I incur a little more cost, complete the job a little more. Then finally, in the third year, I complete my full job. I sell it to my customer. He pays me whatever he has to pay me. Or whatever he has not yet paid, he pays me. So if you look at this kind of thing, cost is incurred across different periods, but the job gets over only at the end of a certain specific point in time in the future. So there are going to be some peculiar points here that you didn't have earlier. I'll give you a simple example. Let's take a construction contract. Okay. Let's take a construction contract. Some construction company has taken a construction contract, and the contract value, let's say, is 100 lakhs. Okay. The contract value is 100 lakhs, or it is 1 crore. Now, this construction contract, let's say it goes for 3 years. It's a 3-year project. 3-year project. Now, let's look at what are the expenses that were incurred for this project. Okay. Let's look at year 1, year 2, and then let's look at year 3. So there are 3 years. I'll just give some random numbers here. 20 lakhs, and then let's say 30 lakhs, and let me expand this. Okay, so 20 lakhs or 50 lakhs, let's say another 25 lakhs. Okay. So these are the expenses that were incurred. Contract value means this is the price that the customer pays. The price that the customer pays. Okay, great. Now, let us see how we will account for the cost and revenue here. Traditionally, if I should follow the traditional system of accounting, when will I recognize revenue? I will recognize revenue when my job is done, right? When my job is done, I'll recognize revenue. When you're selling a product, when will you recognize revenue? When the product is handed over to the customer. In other words, if you technically go as per accounting standard, you will say when the risk and reward gets transferred to the buyer, at that time you will recognize revenue. Now, if I should apply that kind of a concept here and say, I finish my job at the end of third year. Okay, I finished my job at the end of third year. So it is only at that point in time that I should recognize my revenue. So when am I handing over this project to my customer? End of the third year. So let me recognize my revenue at the end of third year. So 1 crore will be taken to the credit of my P&L account end of third year. Let's say I do this, I follow this. Now, so again, when will I show this as revenue in my P&L account? Year 3. I will not show it as revenue in year 1. I will not show it as revenue in year 2. Now what happens is the matching principle kicks in. The matching principle kicks in and says expenses have to be recognized only in the year in which the revenue relating to that expense has been recognized. So what we do is year 1 we may debit our P&L or trading account, whatever it is, we may debit with 20 lakhs of expenses, but immediately we realize that we can't show 20 lakhs as expense or cost in the first year because no revenue was recognized. Immediately we go to the credit side and say buy closing stock, and we say 20 lakhs. So debit expenses 20 lakhs, buy closing stock WIP, you say 20 lakhs, and then you remove everything from P&L. So year 1 P&L, net result it shows nothing. Similarly, year 2 P&L, what happens is you bring in opening stock of 20 lakhs from the previous year. You have that year expenses of 30 lakhs. So now you have debit of 50 lakhs in your P&L. But do you recognize any revenue? You don't recognize. So entire 50 lakhs, you go to the P&L credit side. You say buy closing stock WIP. and then you say 50 lakhs, again you knock off everything in your P&L account. Second year P&L also has nothing. Third year what you do is you bring 50 lakhs from last 2 years as opening stock, you debit current year's 25 lakhs. Now you have 75 lakhs of debit in your P&L account. You have 1 crore of credit towards contract revenue, because in the third year you finish your project, you sell it to your customer, you have 1 crore of revenue. So what you do is you account for that, and now you say that this year I made third year you recognize a profit of 25 lakhs. So third year you recognize a profit of 25 lakhs. Now you have followed the revenue recognition, that is the general revenue recognition principle, and based on that you have also, according to matching principle, you have postponed all your expense recognition to the third year. Thereby you have recognized profit of 25 lakhs in third year. Now my question is, this profit arose in year 3 in your books of accounts, as far as, I mean, with respect to how you have prepared your accounts. But honestly, is this profit because of year 3 activities? Definitely not, right? From year 1 work has been happening, and that work gets completed in year 3. So because of your accounting pushing everything to year 3, you are recognizing profit of 25 lakhs in year 3. Now that does not ideally mean that year 3 something happened and you suddenly got profit of 25 lakhs. This profit of 25 lakhs belongs to all the 3 years actually. It belongs to all the 3 years. Only because you shifted revenue and cost recognition to third year, profit also gets recognized in the third year, but that is ideally not going to make great sense. It will mean as though in year 1 and year 2, nothing happened. There was no result of your operations in year 1 and year 2. Suddenly everything came in year 3. That's not a great deal. I mean, that's not a very good idea, right? It's not a very good way of presentation. You understand that. So this is why contract costing says, what we will do is we will have proportionate recognition of revenue in every year, subject to a certain way in which we will handle this. I am not getting into that right now. When we start looking at problems, you'll understand that. Subject to a certain way in which we will recognize revenue. We are going to recognizing it. We are going to be recognizing it. And since we are recognizing revenue on a certain basis throughout the 3-year project life, we will also be able to recognize cost to a certain extent. That means to a certain extent, we will also be able to recognize profit. So now we are going to work in such a way that we kind of split this profit across 3 years based on some basis. Based on some basis, we are going to split this profit across 3 years. Now, I mean, how it is done, what do we call it, how is that we account for it, all of these things we will see definitely. But now I'm just giving you an overview. So does that mean that we will say, okay, fine, 1 crore, let me equally split 1 crore across 3 years. First year, 33 lakhs, 33,333. Second year, 33 lakhs, 33,333. And then fourth year, 33 lakhs, 33,333. Let me equally split revenue, recognized all of these costs in the years, and then whatever is the balancing number, either it's a profit or it's a loss. First year it will be a profit, second year it will be big profit, second year it will be small profit, third year also it is going to be some profit, right? Now, should I do it like that? Should I recognize evenly like that? Or am I going to do it with a better basis? Or am I going to split my revenue on a, looking at a certain other parameter? How am I going to be splitting my revenue across 3 years? Here is where we are going to have a concept of what we call as work certification. We are going to have a concept of work certification. See, I don't want to split my revenue equally across 3 years, because first year maybe only 20 or 30% work might have been done. Second year probably more than that, 40% work was done. First year 30% work was done, second year probably 40% work was done, then finally the balance 30% was done in the third year. So if when revenue was, when work was done in the proportion of 30, 40 and 30 percentages respectively, why should I split revenue equally across all 3 years? Let me also split revenue on the basis of the work done. So on the basis of work done, I'll split revenue. First year I'll recognize 30% of 1 crore. Second year I'll recognize 40% of 1 crore. Third year I'll recognize 30% of 1 crore. So 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs and then 30 lakhs. Let me recognize revenue like this. At least it makes more sense because it is based on the work done. Now, how is that going to happen? Here is where we are going to have the concept of work certification, where we will have a certification done by an expert. See, I am doing a contract for my customer, either myself or my customer. We can appoint, or together we can appoint an expert who will come to my construction site at the end of every year. He'll look at what has happened and he'll say that, look, so much of activity has happened. Okay, so much of activity has happened. He may say, okay, this year you have done 40% completion. He may give a completion certificate for 40%. Let's say first year he may give, let's say 30% completion or whatever, he may give a certificate. So if he gives 30% completion certificate, then that would mean that I am going to take 30% of my contract revenue into my, I'm going to recognize 30% of my contract revenue in that year. So if he tells me a certain percentage saying that the work you have completed 30% of your work, if he tells that, then 30% of 1 crore I'm going to take. So this is what we call as work certified. So a person is coming and certifying that work and saying, I certify that you have finished 30% of your work. Then based on that, I'll take 30% of 1 crore. Suppose he says work certified is 30 lakhs. He doesn't tell me a percentage. He tells me work certified is 30 lakhs. Then I will automatically recognize 30 lakhs, because instead of telling a percentage and instead of my calculating that number, if he has automatically told me 30 lakhs, he is saying that out of your total contract value of 1 crore, you can recognize 30 lakhs as revenue. If he directly tells me that, that is what I call as work certified, and I directly recognize that. So either he tells me 30%, 30% or 30 lakhs is just an example here. It could be another number also. So either he directly tells me 30%, he tells me directly 30 lakhs. That means that is the part of the sales value that I recognize. Or he might tell me the percentage completion, say 30% over. Then I'll apply that 30% on 1 crore and then I'll get my revenue recognized. So this is what we call as the concept of work certification. So all of this is going to come into our discussion. Now, how is this going to happen? How is this work certification going to help me recognize revenue? How do I recognize all items of costs? And then how do I recognize profit for that year? All of that we are going to understand when we start solving the problems. But for almost all problems, we are going to prepare a certain account called as contract account. This is like process account. Process costing, for every process you had process level 3 processes means you say process 1 account, process 2 account, process 3 account. Since there it was continuous processes, you said the output of process 1 becomes input of process 2, output of process 2 becomes input of process 3. Like that you may say. But here you look at one contract independently. If a construction company is doing 3 projects for 3 customers, it may have customer 1 contract account, customer 2 contract account, customer 3 contract account. In that contract account, all items of expenses or cost incurred with respect to that contract will be collected, revenue will be collected, and thereby that contract account will also show the profit. So I can say a contract account is like a mini P&L account. It's like a mini P&L account. It's like for one contract you're preparing a P&L account. Then finally when you get a profit or loss from that, it will be transferred to the main costing P&L account. We will look at that a little later. That is where I want to tell you that lot of things have been removed from your syllabus. So lot of interesting discussions in contract costing is not going to happen because it's not part of your syllabus. How to take profit from your contract account to your Costing P&L. If there's going to be loss, it's going to be pretty simple. But if there's going to be profit, how to take the profit to your costing P&L account? That is what, in fact, I would say is the most interesting part of this chapter. But unfortunately, that's not there, or rather, fortunately, that's not there. If you look at preparation, you look at it from preparation perspective. So, through preparing this contract account, we'll get most of our job done. Okay, so let us see how this has to happen through a problem. So with this background, now you get an overview of what we are likely to be discussing. Have that overview. Now we will do problem. I'm going to take you to study material illustration 4. As I said, all the problems I'm going to discuss are going to be study material problems only. Study material illustration 4. So what you do is go to ICAI website. Okay, if you have hard copy study material, great. If you don't have that, then go to ICAI study material. I'll tell you how you should go. Or let me go here and type this to you. See, ICAI BOS, then new scheme of education. Go click on that, and then you have cost intermediate, and click on cost and management accounting. And then click on study material. Click on study materials, yeah. And then whatever topic you want, you can select that. Okay, so please, everybody will have access to this. So please go through that, take it. Now let me share the soft copy of the study material with you. Let me show that to you. Let me take illustration 4. I'm going to first read this illustration 4, and as we go through, we'll understand all the concepts very clearly. Once we are done through one illustration, then other things will become relatively quicker for us. Only one or two new concepts, if at all we have, we are going to learn that. Other than that, the process and the mechanically doing thing, that's going to be something that's it'll naturally come to you. So it's only the first illustration that will take some time to understand the method of preparing the contract account. So when I read the question now, many things will look very new to you. Don't worry, just follow. You also read the question. Then as I explain, you will start getting clarity. The following expenses were, and one other thing I want to tell you is, in this, as far as the ICAI study material is organized, in the beginning you will see a lot of formulas. Okay, you'll see a lot of formulas. But one way of doing it is memorizing all the formulas and then putting all of that to use and then understanding the logic behind most of the formulas. Other way of doing it is, see, I've not told you any formula right now. Let's start doing a question. When we see the need for using a certain formula, we will use it. That way, it will automatically stay in your mind rather than a special exercise of memorizing and then coming. I'm not saying that that's not a good idea. Well, one way is doing that, but I would suggest let's take a problem, use the numbers and start discussing. Okay. So, the following expenses were incurred on a contract: materials purchased 6 lakhs, material drawn from stores 1 lakh, wages 2,25,000, plant issued 75,000, chargeable expenses 75,000, apportioned indirect expenses 25,000. The contract was for 20 lakhs and it commenced on January 1, 2018. The value of the work completed and certified up to 30th November 2018 was 13 lakhs, of which 10 lakh 40,000 was received in cash. The balance being held back as retention money by the contractee. The value of work completed subsequent to the architect's certificate but before 31st December 2018 was 60,000. There were also lying on the site materials of the value of rupees 40,000. It was estimated that the value of the plant as at 31st December 2018 was 30,000. You are required to compute value of work certified, cost of work not certified, and notional profit on the contract till the year ended 31st December 2018. Right? Let's just use these details. Prepare a contract account. So in this question, what I want you to do is focus on two things. How is the contract account prepared and what are the concepts that I'm going to discuss regarding certification of work and recognition of revenue and thereby recognition of profit. See, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare a contract account. Typical like any other account, I have a debit side and I have a credit side in this account. See, I told you contract account is like a P&L account, so it is prepared in the nature of a notional account, right? Just like how you would debit all items of income to the contract account, all items of expenses to the contract account. Similarly, we are going to do the same thing, right? And if at all you had any closing stock in a trading account, what would you do? You would go and credit the trading account. So why are you crediting closing stock in a trading account? Because to that extent you had already debited expenses, but you want to remove those expenses from that year's trading account because you are not selling the goods, so you are going and crediting it, right? So that's what you are basically doing in a trading account. So all those principles that you have learned in the preparation of a trading account or P&L account, that's exactly what you are going to be learning. You're going to be applying in the preparation of a contract account. Okay, so first they say materials purchased 6 lakhs, materials drawn from stores 7 lakhs. I am just writing 2 materials 7 lakhs. 7 lakhs of materials was issued to the contract, either purchased and directly given, or in the stores it was there, it was given to the contract. So 7 lakhs worth of materials was issued. That means the first item of cost incurred for the contract right now, or the cost allocated that we are allocating right now, is material cost 7 lakhs. Pretty straightforward. Even in process costing, this is what you do, right? You go and write 2 materials in the beginning. And any work is done, 2 work done. So like that. So 2 materials, 7 lakhs. First item, 2 materials, 7 lakhs. 7 lakhs again comprises of the 6 lakhs and the 1 lakhs. Next, wages. 2 lakh 25,000. I go and write here 2 wages, 2 lakh and 25,000. Let me zoom this a little more. Okay, 2 wages, 2 lakh 25,000. Let me come to depreciation, but before that, come to chargeable expenses. Some expenses are incurred, 2 chargeable expenses, 75,000. Then apportioned indirect expenses. Some indirect expenses, some overheads were basically incurred. Some basis of apportionment was used, and this contract is getting a share of the overheads to the extent of 25,000. So you are capturing that by saying 2 indirect expenses, 25,000. So let me put a green symbol on whatever I have discussed. Indirect expenses has been discussed. Expenses here, chargeable expenses discussed. Wages discussed. And then materials discussed. Now, see, you can see here they are saying that the plant issued was 75,000. What is the meaning of this? Plant here refers to fixed assets. This year what has happened is when the contract began this year, fixed assets to the extent of 75,000 was separately allocated to the contract. They allocated fixed assets to the extent of 75,000 to this contract. Now, when this fixed asset came inside the contract, it had a value of 75,000. Now, that fixed asset at the end of the year, if you see here in the question, it says that it is estimated that the value of the plant as at 31st December 2018 was 30,000. So you can see that in that 1 year time from 1st January 2018 to 31st December 2018, the fixed asset has dropped by 75,000, from 75,000 to 30,000. 45,000 rupees in value the plant has dropped. In which year? In this year. Now this drop in value is what we call as depreciation, because you are not told anything about sale of asset. You are just told value in the beginning is 75,000, value in the end is 30,000. So drop in the value of an asset is what we call as depreciation. Now a question is, why will a fixed asset depreciate in value? Either due to time or due to usage. So the plant which came to the contract at a value of 75,000, and at the end of the year, if the plant is having a value of 40,000, that means we can say that depreciation for that year is, sorry, not 40,000, 30,000. That means we can say depreciation for that year was 45,000, or that year to the extent of 45,000, the plant was used in the contract. So that charge of depreciation, we are allocating it here and saying, is this depreciation because the plant was used for the contract? So we are saying 45,000 here. Another way of saying is, put plant here at 75,000 and remove plant from your contract account by crediting to the extent of 35,000. Debit 75, credit 30, effectively what happens is you are debiting only net 45,000. So introduce entire plant of 75,000 in the contract account and remove 30,000 when the year gets over, because to that extent you have not used it. Bring in at whatever value it is coming inside and remove whatever value is not used at the end of the year. Effectively you are still recognizing 45,000. So either you do it this way, or study material what it would have done, it will say to plant, and then here it will say by plant carried forward. 75,000 will come here and then 30,000 will come here. Effectively net debit will be 45,000. Whichever way you feel convenient. I feel convenient doing it this way. So I'll bring inside to depreciation 45,000. Here it was easy, I've explained, but I would ideally ask you to put a note here. For instance, you can say here 75,000 minus 30,000, you can say is 45,000. So this is depreciation. We have discussed this also. Only thing that we should now do is discuss the items on the credit side. First thing I'm going to discuss is there were also lying on the site materials of the value 40,000. See here, you introduce materials to the extent of 7 lakhs when in the beginning of the year, right? In the beginning of the year or through the year, sometime after the beginning, whatever, you introduce materials to the extent of 7 lakhs. At the end of the year, suppose there was no item of materials unused, all the materials were consumed in that year itself, no item unused, then you don't need to do anything. But if in that year 40,000 worth of materials were not used and you just allow the 7 lakhs to remain here, that means you are debiting an item of expense in this year pertaining to something that was not used this year. Out of 7 lakhs, 40,000 of materials are still lying on the site. That means they were not used. If they are not used this year, maybe they'll be used next year. Something that's going to be used next year, why are you debiting that cost this year itself? So 7 lakhs has an item which is not used this year. Some materials were not used this year. One way of doing it is, as soon as you read the item, go change this from 7 lakhs and make it 6 lakhs 60,000. Or other way of doing it is, since you have over debited, you have 7 lakhs, remove that cost from this year's account by saying buy materials carried forward 40,000. So basically it's like closing stock of materials. You bring in materials of 7 lakhs, 40,000 you don't use, remove the cost, take it to the next year if you're going to use it in the next year. So you're crediting buy materials carried forward 40,000. As simple as this. This is the explanation for materials carried forward. Now, value of the work completes. Okay, let me go to the certification of work here. The value of the work completed and certified up to 30th November 2018 was 13 lakhs, of which 10 lakh 40,000 was received in cash, the balance being held back as retention money by the contractee. The value of work completed subsequent to the architect certificate but before 31st December 2018 was 60,000. How should we deal with this? See, we are going to have two items here, okay? Work certified and work uncertified. We are going to have two items here. We'll spend some time to understand both of these. Already work certified, what that means, we have had a discussion. We're going to apply it right now in a problem, but work uncertified, what it is, we have to discuss it for the first time right now. I'll explain that. See, has the question told you what is the entire contract value? Yes, the contract was for 20 lakhs. See, this year you should recognize some amount of revenue, right? You should recognize some amount of revenue this year. Now, how do you recognize some amount of revenue this year? You appoint an expert who comes and tells you so much of work is done. Okay, so much of work is done. You go and tell him. So, he tells you, based on that, you recognize that bit. Now, if you see here, the expert that the company has appointed, the construction company has appointed here is an architect. So, the architect here comes and says, on 30th of November, he comes and says, 13 lakhs of work was done. So, actually the year gets over on 31st December. He should have come on 31st December, but whatever, he comes on 30th November and he says, 13 lakhs of work certified. Instead of telling 65% of work was done, if he had told that, I could have just multiplied 65% of 20 lakhs, I would have known 13 lakhs. He directly tells me work certified is 13 lakhs. So I understand that if 13 lakhs is the work certified, maybe 65% is the work done. So 65% of 20 lakhs, which is basically the 13 lakhs that he calls as work certified, to this extent, I can recognize my revenue. So I go here and say, by work certified, I say 13 lakhs. I say by work certified and I say 13 lakhs. Now, this is, understand, this is like sale recognition. Okay, this is like sale recognition. You are recognizing 13 lakhs. Now, all items of cost were incurred this year. Several items of cost was incurred this year, right? Now, ideally, you should not have recognized any item of cost this year if you didn't recognize any revenue. But now it makes sense for you to recognize cost because certain extent you're recognizing contract price also you're recognizing to certain extent here. How much are you recognizing? 13 lakhs. Now, ideally, what must have happened is there must have been nothing here called work uncertified. 13 lakhs, you should have recognized revenue. Then all this, we understand why this 40,000 is removed. All this minus 40,000 would have been the cost. This 13 lakhs minus the net cost should have given you profit here. But we are having one line here called as work uncertified. What is this work uncertified? We'll have to understand here. And why is it getting credited here? We should understand. See, when does the architect come and give the certificate? On 30th November 2018. Great. Now, after 30th November, on 1st December, from 1st December 2018 to 31st December 2018, tell me, did the company do any work or not? Obviously, some work would have happened. Just because architect came and left, the company is not going to sit idle for one entire month. The company obviously is going to come and is going to continue and do some work. However, that work which was done, okay, that work which was done from 1st December to 31st of December, that is not some work which was certified by the architect. Now, was work done between 1st December and 31st December? Yes, work was done. But was that last month work certified by the architect? No, it was not certified because architect visited the construction site on 30th November and he left. So whatever work has happened after that is work in this context. It is work which has happened but not certified. That is why the name given is work not certified. If work itself has not happened, then there's no scope for discussion. But work has happened, but that work has not yet been certified. Now, if that work has not yet been certified, the meaning of the implication of this is, even though that work has happened, you should not recognize any contract price to that extent. See, you are recognizing 13 lakhs out of 20 lakhs. Great, because the architect came and told, recognize 13 lakhs. Now, actually, I can recognize something more than 13 lakhs because 13 lakhs is only for the work done between January and 30th of November 2018. What about the last month? Last month, I didn't sit idle, right? I was not plucking grass sitting in the last month. I did some work. So that means I can in fact recognize more than 13 lakhs, right? Out of my 20 lakhs. This is where we are going to follow a principle saying that we will not recognize anything more than 13 lakhs because we might have done work in the last month. We might have done, listen to this very carefully, we might have done work in the last month, but it was not certified by the expert for us to recognize. We are saying we have done work, but the certification is very important. Since there is no certification, even though work was done, obviously that extra, that 1 month, last 1 month, because of that, I'm not going to recognize anything extra. Anything more than 13 lakhs, I'm not going to recognize. So though work is done, if it is not certified, work uncertified, will not contribute to any extra recognition of contract price. Only work certified, to that extent only you will recognize contract price. This is the first implication of work not certified. See, another implication of work not certified, I'll tell you. First implication is, even though work has happened, you will not recognize contract revenue. That is the first implication. There is another implication here. See, what is that implication? I'll tell you. Now, let us see what is the total cost that has been incurred this year. total cost that has been incurred, I'll just add all of these items of costs and I'll subtract this materials taken away, right? 40,000. So I'm going to say that this year a cost of 10,30,000 was incurred. See, my question is, this cost, is it for the work done from 1st January to 30th November, or is it also for the work done in the last month? In other words, my question is this 10,30,000 cost for 1st January to 30th November or 1st January to 31st December? You will definitely tell me this is from 1st Jan to 31st December. You will tell me this is 1st Jan to 31st December. Now, just because architect came and left, this doesn't mean that this work is not, this does not have the cost incurred in the last month. This is for the entire year. Now my question is, if you don't do anything to your contract account, you allow 10,30,000 to remain in your contract account. For that last 1 month, that cost incurred for doing December work is a part of 10,30,000. It is a part of the contract account. But for that work done, no revenue is getting recognized. Revenue is not getting recognized because you don't have completion certificate. He has not certified your work. But for doing that uncertified work, the cost incurred in the month of December, that alone is there. So now this will again beat the matching principle if you allow this entire 10,30,000 to be there. What it will mean is last month work, cost alone is recognized, sale is not recognized. That means you are not following the matching principle, which says incur cost only to the extent revenue is recognized. Only when revenue for that cost is recognized, you recognize cost also, right? That will go for a toss if you allow the entire 10,30,000 to be there in your contract account, because this includes, part of this is for work done in last month for which revenue has not been taken. This 13 lakhs which is revenue recognized, this is like revenue recognized. This 13 lakh which is like revenue recognized, this is only for Jan to November. But this cost of 10,30,000 is for Jan to December. That one extra month cost alone is there, revenue is not there. This is where what we will do is the last month cost or the cost of work done which is not certified. Read this sentence very carefully. Cost of work done which is not certified will be removed from the account. Will be removed from the account. Cost of work done which is not certified will be removed from the account. Once that is removed, once a last month cost is removed, then we are in line with matching principle, mainly because 1st January to 30th November revenue is there, 1st January to 30th November cost is also there. Extra month revenue is not recognized, extra month cost is also not recognized. So that removal of that last month cost is very important. That is what we do here by saying by work uncertified. So when you say here by work uncertified, we are effectively removing the cost associated with work that has happened but not been certified. Now, so the question tells here the value of work completed subsequent but has not been certified is 60,000. So this is they have directly told us cost of work not certified. We remove this cost of work not certified. So then what happens is this 40,000 is removal of cost, material cost. This 60,000 is removal of general cost for the last month, and this 13 lakhs is recognition of revenue. Then obviously all items in the credit side minus all items in the debit side. If you have a deficit in the debit side, you call this obviously a notional profit. If you calculate and see, you get 3,30,000. This is what we call as a profit. Suppose you had all the items in the debit side exceeding the credit side, you have a deficit in the credit side, then you are going to call it as a loss. Now, before I discuss a little further about that work uncertified, one more point alone I should say is, why is this called notional profit? And if it comes here, it will be called as notional loss. Why is this called notional profit, notional loss? The reason is, actually speaking, work is not completely over and you have not completely finished your responsibilities and your customer has not completely given you money. So everything is not, it's not like a product sold. It's not like you come to my shop, I sell you a product, My job is done. I sold you. You paid me money. Your job is done. Sure shot revenue recognized. Sure shot profit. I got the product for 80. I sold it to you at 100. Definitely 20 rupees of profit has been recognized. It is not. It is not a profit recognized with that level of certainty or concreteness. That is why we use the word notional profit here. Okay. Now, one another thing we should understand is, if at all you had a notional loss, okay, if at all you had a notional loss, entire amount of loss must be taken to costing P&L. If you have notional loss, we will see it in a later sum, entire amount to be carried to costing P&L. If you have a notional profit, you can't always say that entire amount to be taken to costing P&L. There, conservative principle may come and say, have some reserve with you. Don't take everything to costing P&L, because if you take something to costing P&L, it will mix with the other items of profit. That means it will be available for other items of expenses also. So if you take something to P&L account, you are freely giving it off to other people. So conservative principle will say that notional profit, just like that, don't take everything to costing P&L. So that means how much of notional profit should I take to costing P&L? How much should I not take to costing P&L? Don't worry about it. That is what is not a part of your syllabus. It's not definitely a part of your syllabus. So it was a part of the old syllabus, but treatment of notional profit was a part of old syllabus. Now it is not a part of your syllabus. So we will leave it here. Contract account, notional profit calculation. That's all. As simple as that. Okay. That is one point. Notional loss, entire amount will go to costing P&L. Notional profit, it may not go to costing P&L entirely, but what will happen is not something that you should worry about. Now, another thing, if you see here, what is the work certified 13 lakhs? That means so much of contract revenue you're recognizing this year. But if the client paying you, your contractee, is he paying you everything? No, he is paying you only 10 lakh 40,000. The balance that he does not pay you is what we call as retention money. Now, why is the concept of retention money coming into play here? The customer is saying, look at this. This is a contract that runs across several years. So I don't want to completely part with my money. Though work done certified is to the extent of 13 lakhs, I don't want to part with the entire money. I am not very sure about what may happen tomorrow. So I may want to reserve some money and keep it. Okay. I may want to reserve some money and keep it with me. Later I'll give you, release all the money. So for reasons like that, he may have some money retained with him. That's called as retention money. So work certified minus cash received is retention money. Work certified minus retention money is cash received. So there is no need for you to memorize this formula if you understand the concept. But this will be given as a formula in the study material. That's why I told you, let's not focus on memorizing all formulas. As we start logically looking at problems, you'll automatically understand this. Great. So this is about the retention money. Now, another important thing to understand is work certified is in sales terms. This is always in sales terms because the contract revenue is this a part of the contract revenue, right? Since you have recognized 13 lakhs here, next year you will recognize only the balance 7 lakhs if completely the work gets over. So this 13 lakhs is a part of 20 lakhs. So work certified is always in sales terms. Work uncertified is always in cost terms. That's very, very important. Work certified is in sales terms. Work uncertified is in cost terms. Because you're removing, work uncertified is basically removal of cost for work which was not certified. Okay, that's important in sales term, and this is in cost terms. Last thing I want to tell you in this problem here before I proceed is this simple thing. See, now here in our case, why did we have work uncertified? We had work uncertified because the architect came on 30th of November, but we closed our year on 31st of December. So for that 1 month time, the work that happened, architect did not again come back on 31st of December. So since he came 1 month earlier, he was, for all practical purposes, he was not able to certify the last month work. Maybe if he had come on 31st of December, he might have said that work certified is 14 lakhs. So because he didn't come at the end of the year, he came 1 month before, we are saying that we have some amount of work that is uncertified and we are doing all of these things. Now, the question is, should this always happen like this? When the architect, let's say the architect came for the first time on 31st of December. Architect did not come on 30th of November. He came for the first time on 31st of December. Now when he came on 31st of December, if he comes when the year gets over and when we stop the work for that year, in those cases, can we have work uncertified? My question is, if the architect had come on 31st of December 2018, still would we be having a situation where we can have work uncertified? It looks like we cannot have a situation like that, because what immediately occurs to our mind is, array, year is over. If he had come 1 month earlier, I can understand why there will be work uncertified. He came on the last day, right, on 31st of December. That means all work is over that time. Can't he go look around and exactly certify? Whatever work I have done, maybe 50% complete, 65% complete, 70% complete. Can he say, I mean, why can't he say that if he comes on the last day? See, what happens is, to a certain extent, he can definitely say, see, I can say 50% work over. But in fact, you might have worked a little more than that. He may not be able to conclusively say how much you've finished. He may want to wait for some more time and then say how much has been finished. I'll give you a very simple example, okay? Let's deviate from contract costing for some time and let's have a simple example here, okay? Let's say you're traveling from Chennai to Trivandrum, okay? Traveling to Chennai to Trivandrum, travel by train. Okay, great. Now, entire journey, let's say is whatever based on the route that you take. Either you travel through Tamil Nadu or you travel through Kerala. Mainly, it'll either be close to 900 kilometers or close to some 700 kilometers or whatever it is. Okay, 750 kilometers. Whatever it is, Chennai to Trivandrum that you're traveling by train. Let's say that is your 100% of distance. Let me break this into 4 parts, okay? Chennai to Salem, this is one part. Let's say Salem to Coimbatore, this is another part. Coimbatore to Ernakulam, this is another part. And let me say Ernakulam to Thiruvananthapuram is another part, okay? You have 4 parts. Chennai to Salem is one part, Salem to Coimbatore is one part, Coimbatore to Ernakulam is one part, Ernakulam to Trivandrum is another part. Now, because of this, let's have some milestones. From the time you start from Chennai, Salem is a milestone. Then, let's say Coimbatore is another milestone. And then Ernakulam is another milestone. And then finally, Trivandrum is the last milestone. Okay, let's say this is what it is. Let's say that Salem is 25% distance covered. Coimbatore is 25% distance covered. Ernakulam, is 50% distance covered cumulatively. Ernakulam is 75% distance covered. And Thiruvananthapuram is 100% distance covered. Okay, let's say this is what it is. Salem, Coimbatore, Ernakulam and Trivandrum. Now what happens is, you start from Chennai and some time passes, your train is halting at Salem. Okay, train is halting at Salem. I give you a call and I ask you how much of, what proportion of your journey have you traveled? How is your journey going? All this thing I inquire. You also tell me about how your journey is going and how you have a very irritating passenger along with you who's nagging you, all that story, how the AC did not work in the train, how you complained, all those story you tell. And then finally I ask you a question, where are you? How much distance have you completed? You tell me I finished 25% of my travel. Great. Next what happens is, train immediately leaves, you cut the call. Then after some time I call you, you say that, I ask you, now where are you? You tell me all stories that happened between Salem and Coimbatore. When a train is halting at Coimbatore, I ask you, where are you? You tell me, I am at Coimbatore. Then immediately I ask you, how much distance have you completed? You have said 50% journey over, is what you say. Now, then I ask you a question. Then what happens is, again train leaves. I ask you, after some time, I call you. Now, last two times I called you exactly when train was halting at a station. Now, after the train leaves from Coimbatore, maybe let's say 1.5 hours later, I call you. Now, I ask you, how much distance have you traveled? Now, actually, you tell me that I have crossed 50%, right? Same position you maintain. But have you just traveled 50%? Definitely not. So you know that train has even passed Palakkad, and maybe it's like halfway between Palakkad and Thrissur, but you're not exactly able to say how much distance you have traveled. Can you say you have finished 75%? Definitely not, because only when you come to Ernakulam you can say you have finished 75% complete. But you have crossed Coimbatore. You can't say that I've done only 50%. So you might have crossed next station Palakkad, and you may be halfway through between Palakkad and Thrissur. You might have traveled definitely more than 50%. That is travel done, but you are not able to certify that travel. You can't say clearly so much percentage. I say, okay, no problem, I cut the call. Next, what happens is Ernakulam station is there. That time I correctly call you. Now you say 75% journey over. Okay, 75% journey over is what you say. Now, this is an example of work uncertified. When I called you at Salem or when you were at Coimbatore, you were able to clearly say so much of journey I finished. But in between when I called you, you have traveled. Definitely you have traveled. It's not that you have not traveled. You have covered more than 50%, but you were not able to tell me how much. That's like work done, but not certified, because other person is not able to certify. He needs a little one more milestone for you to be able to, for him to be clearly able to certify that. So that is what we mean. So you will probably say, I've crossed 50%. Little more, I don't know what it is. That's but you know the time it has taken. Okay, you know the time it has taken. Maybe you can say it has been 1 hour and 45 minutes since I crossed Coimbatore. So you know the time it has taken. That is like the cost you have taken. You know the work, for the work that has been uncertified, you know the cost. It's like the 60,000. But you will not recognize revenue because you clearly don't know what is the percentage that has been completed. So even though the expert may come on the last day, if it's a situation like this, then you can definitely have a situation of work uncertified. But the moral of the story is, work uncertified is in cost terms. You are basically going to remove the cost to the extent of work that has happened, but you are not recognizing it because certification has not happened. Okay, so the entire idea behind your contract account. So at this moment, what I want you to do is, I want you to pause the video. I want you to redo this entire question. Okay, go walk through every step, how you are debiting all items of expenses, and how you are removing one item of expenditure, and then how you are, what is work certified, what is work uncertified, all of those things. Just pause the video, and then you can run through all of these things in your mind, get some clarity, then finally understand your notional profit. Then we can go ahead with our, and then you can follow the other things. Okay, now let me get to the next problem, which is problem number 5, illustration 5 in the study material. Okay. Illustration 5. Now again, we are here also, we are going to prepare a contract account, calculate notional profit, all those things. But our calculation is going to be absolutely simple, and we will just have one new learning element regarding uncertified work. We'll have to calculate a certain thing. But again, that's going to be pretty simple. If I explain, you'll completely understand everything. So it's about that. Okay. A contractor prepares his accounts for the year ending 31st December each year. He commenced a contract on 1st April 2018. The following information relates to the contract as on 31st December 2018. Materials issued to the contract in that period was 2,51,000. Wages 5,65,600. Salary to foremen 81,300. A machine costing 2,60,000 has been on the site for 146 days. Its working life is estimated at 7 years and its final scrap value at rupees 15,000. A supervisor who is paid 8,000 rupees per annum has devoted one half of his time to this contract. All other expenses and admin charges amount to 1,36,500. Material in hand at site costs 35,400 on 31st December 2018. The contract price is 20 lakhs. On 31st December 2018, two-thirds of the contract was completed. How much of the contract was completed? Two-thirds. But look at the next line. The architect issued certificates covering 50% of the contract price. Covering 50% of the contract price. And the contractor had been paid rupees 7,50,000 on account. Prepare contract account and show the notional profit or loss as on 31st December 2018. This is the question. Now, let me go to the solution. I'll explain stage by stage. We'll have the green coloring for things that we have finished discussing. Okay. To materials, 2,51,000. Direct, straightly pick from the question. Put this here. Straightforward. You're issuing materials. To wages, 5,65,600. Again, it is there in the question. To wages, 5,65,600. To foreman salary, 81,300. Again, it's there in the question. You have this here. Then to depreciation, I'll come to it. To supervisor salary, see the supervisor is paid 8,000. Don't entirely debit 8,000 because he has devoted only one half of his time to this contract. Okay, so you also just pay, charge only one half of this here. So it's going to be 8,000 into 50%. However, it is 8,000 per month. Okay, so we are talking about 9 months, 1st April, 31st December. So it's 8,000 into 50%, 4,000 into 9, it is 36,000. Be very careful about this. It's 8,000 per month. That means 4,000 per month. If you take half of it, 4,000 per month into 9 months. Why 9 months? 1st April to 31st December. April to December, 9 months, 36,000. So we have finished supervisor salary also. Other expenses and admin charges is 1,36,500. Great. 1,36,500. Now depreciation, my calculation is, look at this. A machine costing 2,60,000 has been on the site for 146 days. Its working life is estimated 7 years and its final scrap value is 15,000. See, the moment you are given details about original cost, useful life and scrap value, you should understand that they are asking you to follow straight line method of depreciation. So what is the depreciation? Cost minus salvage value by useful life. 2,60,000 minus 15,000 divided by 7 will give you the annual depreciation charge. But the entire amount is not something that you will go and debit in your contract account, because this machine was used in the site for the contract only for 146 days. So the annual amount, once you calculate into 146 by 365, will give you proportionate charge which you will debit in the contract account. See the calculation here. Annual depreciation, I've used formula cost minus salvage value divided by useful life. I have the formula here. I have the number here. Proportionate charge, number I got is 35,000. 35,000 into 146 by 365, you get 14,000 here. Okay, so go back and put 14,000. Now, buy materials carried down 35,400. Why are we doing this? Because on the last day of this year, when I'm closing the books and I'm preparing the contract account, I find that still materials of so much is there. That means I've not used it. Whatever I've not used, why should I recognize the cost? That 35,400 is actually a part of 2,51,000. So let me remove this. Okay, I'll remove this here. So this is why I have this credit here. Now, what amount of revenue should I recognize to the extent of work certified? So come down here. The architect issues certificates covering 50% of the contract price, and the contract, leave what he has been paid, leave it. He has covered 50% of the contract price, right? That means so here, instead of telling the amount, he has said 50%. So we should apply this 50% of 20 lakhs. It is going to be 10 lakhs here. So I'm sorry. So 10 lakhs, I go and put this number here. Okay. I put 10 lakhs here, 20 lakhs into 50%. This is my calculation. Okay. 10 lakhs. Let's cover this. Now let me come to work uncertified. Here work uncertified, I'm going to go for a calculation. See, assume this number is correct. I'll explain how this number is arrived at. Then we are going to have obviously items of credit you will total and see. Items of debit. If you have excess of credit, obviously you have profit here. That's called as notional profit. That's what the question wants us to find out. We have found out notional profit. As simple as that. Only thing is, how is work certified calculated? See, in this question, they have not told us what is the work uncertified. What is the cost of the work uncertified? They have not told us. As understand, always work certified is in selling price terms. Work uncertified is in cost terms. They have not told me what is the cost of work uncertified. So I should find out. I'll show you the calculation. I have broken the calculation into several steps. Each step, if you understand, you will get a hint of, you will understand why this 2,62,250 is what it is. Okay, see. First thing I want to do is I want to understand what is the cost I've incurred till date. 1st April 2018 or whatever date till 31st December, what is the cost that I've incurred? I want to understand that. Very simple. I see what are all the debits in my P&L account. I take all of these debits here. I total that up and I say my debits is 10,84,400. All the debits. I can't say that is my complete cost because some of the cost I'm removing it, so less materials carried down. So I get 10,49,000. This 10,49,000 is the cost I've incurred till date. What do I mean by cost incurred till date? From 1st April to 31st of December. Next, what I do is expected cost for full work. The reason is this 10,49,000. If you ask me, for how much of work is this 10,49,000 cost incurred, I'm going to say this is for 2/3 of work. This is for 2/3 of work done. 2/3 of work was done at the time the contract account is prepared on 31st of December. 10,49,000 is for 2/3. If 10,49,000 is for 2/3, I want to understand what is the likely cost for the entire thing. So I'm saying 10,49,000 into 3 by 2. 10,49,000 is for 2/3. What is for the entire thing? I'm saying 10,49,000 into 3 by 2. If I do this, I am getting cost for 100% completion as 15,73,500. If 10,49,000 is for 2/3, for entire work, I am getting 15,73,500. Now, this 15,73,500 is for 100% of the work. But out of this, if you see, 50% of the work has been certified. So if I take 50% of 15,73,500, I get 786,750. So this is the work for 100. This is the cost for 100% of the work. I know 50% work has been certified. Actually, 2/3 of the work, which is 66.67, has been completed. What is the work certified? 50% has been certified. So 50% of the total cost is 786,750. See, understand that the cost that has been incurred till date is 10,49,000. Out of this 10,49,000, which is for 2/3 of the work, I can allow 7,86,750 to lie in my account because this is cost of work certified. Because 50% of work is certified, so this 786,750 is cost of work certified. So obviously now I can understand if cost incurred till date is 10,49,000. Cost of work certified is this. Obviously, the difference between 10,49,000 and 7,86,000 is going to give me cost of work uncertified. So I take cost to date minus cost of work certified. I get cost of work uncertified. So much of cost, 262,250 of cost, which is a part of my 10,49,000, is not allowed to be there in my contract account this year because to that extent, work also has not been certified. So what I do is I come and remove that cost by saying by work uncertified. Once I do this, I get my notional profit here. So this is how this question is done. So you can see that everything remains constant. Everything is very similar to what we have done earlier, except for the fact that this amount alone we have to calculate in a slightly different way. Not in a different way, in the logical, we have to calculate this. Earlier we didn't have to calculate it, right? So this completes your illustration 5. Now these problems, if you completely understand, as I told in the beginning, any problem you should be able to do. Okay, so I'll do one thing. I'll stop this video, this lecture with this. In the next lecture, I'll continue do the other 3 or 4 problems, and with that we can wind up our contract costing.